As you can see, we're socially distant, so I'm going to take my mask off. But hello, Kershaw County family and friends. Welcome to the November edition of the Supe Chat. I'm Shane Robbins, the superintendent here at the Kershaw County School District, and today I'm joined by Executive Director of Community Relations, Byrd. We wanted to spend a little time today with y'all and just share some of the observations that we have had in the school district since reopening on September 8th. And the data that we're using to try to make the best decisions possible for the safe and healthy environments for our student and staff. So the first thing that you'll see here is our COVID-19 dashboard. It's located on our website. In this slide, you'll see the link to the dashboard, and I just wanted to start off by saying we have tracked this every single day in real-time numbers and have been very pleased with what we're seeing. If you click on the link itself, it will take you to the web page, and you can scroll through and find your child's building or whatever. You can look at all the buildings in the school district. At the time of taping, we have a little over 6,000, almost 7,000 students that are back in our face-to-face learning environment. And of those 6,623 students, currently we only have 6 positive cases. We have 1,600 plus employees, and of the 1,600 plus employees, we have 10 positive cases. And so we're very happy about that. And I think, Marianne, the thing we're most happy about is the fact that contact tracing has not revealed that they've contracted COVID-19 at school.
Exactly. I think we've had a good response to people saying this helps with your transparency. Parents that maybe are used to being in and out of schools and they can't do that this year, they know that we're keeping up with this type of data. We're showing it to everybody, and I think it's important to know how this data is collected.
Right, and that's a good question. The district office, the building administrators do not capture the data. We have healthcare professionals in our school district. We have nurses in every single location, and so part of their job is to capture that data and put it in the web page. They also have to report that data to DHEC, and so that way, we're transparent. We know it's clean and clear data, and they're always going to err on the side of caution.
They will. So we have some good nurses for sure, and they're taking good care of our students and staff.
Been very, very impressed with them, and so that's how we capture our data. And Monday through Friday we have real-time data.
That's right.
Each day it's reported, and then of course we can go over the course of the weekend. It's re-updated on Monday. So
right.
Yeah. If you look at this next slide, you'll see that we have consistently grown in the number of students that were originally in our virtual learning option. And I think as families have felt more comfortable, they've come back to the face-to-face environment, which is where honestly we would prefer them.
That's right. And I think that's one thing that our community has appreciated, the fact that we gave a choice right at the beginning. And then as people have been able to see, okay, well, I can see by your dashboard that maybe I thought it was going to be a lot worse, but it really is a controlled environment. I feel comfortable with my child coming back face to face. And we know that's what it's all about. That's why teachers got into this business to interact with students. And we know that's where we can have our best personal interaction and engagement for students.
I think we started out the year at roughly 45% that were receiving face-to-face instruction, and now we're up to almost 62%, and those numbers continue to grow. One of the interesting things that we haven't talked about a whole lot, but the protocols and procedures that we have in place to try to prevent COVID-19 from coming in the schools. As we enter flu season, all the communicable illnesses that we sometimes see in schools, and we have a high attendance rate, absentee rates, we're starting to capture that too. So the temperature checks, sanitizing, the extra sanitizing, the face mask, I think it's going to be, for the overall health of our school district, it's going to be a good thing.
It's going to pay benefits for sure. I mean, that's one thing I did hear. Our nurse, Elizabeth Starling, was talking to a TV station this week, and she made that same point. We don't know what COVID and flu look like together, but we do feel like, because we've been taking all these precautions, and it's just on people's minds to be more health conscious, more cleanly with their things. I've never thought about how many things I touch during the day until this happened. So I do think it'll pay benefits for sure.
The next slide, we have tried to be clear and consistent with providing choice, but how did we provide that choice? And so, parents have an opportunity to change learning options, as we just talked about. We've got families coming from the virtual environment to the face-to-face environment, and we've been doing that every 4.5 weeks or the midterm of a grading period. The one thing that we have said, though, is if you're coming from a virtual environment and you do decide you want to come back, we'll take you whenever for two reasons. One, we didn't want it to stack up, at the start of a grading period where people were changing their learning option. The only exceptions that we have ever had to this is if a student is forced to isolate because they did contract COVID-19 or they had to quarantine because they were in close contact, then that wasn't necessarily a learning option change.
Right.
It is they just had to go into the virtual environment until they could come back into the school.
And we may have some families who say, oh, I missed the deadline. I really wanted my student to get switch from the virtual learning option to face-to-face. And what we're saying is that's fine. Go ahead and call your school principal, talk about it. You don't have to wait to the next 4.5 week time period to do that. We're able to take you back in now.
I think it's important for families to understand the reason we put a benchmark out there is so that we could try to logistically prepare our buildings, for when students came back and make sure it was organized in a structured manner. And I do think that our teachers have been very flexible and our principals have been good at trying to adapt as students have come back in the buildings.
Right. It's all a new world for us, and it was a quick turnaround for us once we realized what we were going to do to try to make it happen. But my hat's off, and I know you've seen it in the schools. They've done a great job of making it safe, secure, but it's still child-centered. It's still learning environments that kids are really benefiting from.
I had a chance, and I think you did too. We both went out to Blaney Elementary yesterday and read to students, and especially for our young students, it just is a way of life for them right now. They were perfectly fine, nothing abnormal. They didn't feel anxious. I had good dialogue with them. I got to read to 2 different classes, and like I said, I think that all starts from the home and how the parents kind of prepare them, and then it leads into our teachers and our staff and how they receive them to make the experience a good one.
I agree. I was in front of a class of kindergartners, and they had their masks on. They were on task and ready to go.
I did ask this question every class I've gone into since I've been out visiting the buildings. How many of you are glad to be back in school? And almost every one of them raised their hands because they just want to be around their friends too.
Right.
So.
And the parents might raise their hands too.
Right.
It's all good.
So the next few slides, I want to talk a little bit about student achievement.
Right. That's what we're all about.
And, we can be excited and say, we've done some really good things, but these next few slides are definitely areas of concern.
Right.
And they're not meant to point out at any one building. I did do a comprehensive look. It's more for our principals to have a look at this data themselves. It's come from comments from teachers of things they've noticed. But as you can see, we'll just start with the elementary slide. We had 322 students that received a grade of failing in 524 classes after the first quarter or the first 9 weeks in 2019. You flash forward to our new operating environment, and we have 670 elementary students that have received 1,596 Fs in 1 or more courses. And so right there is a time to pause and say, we know we have some issues and some concerns.
That's right. And all decisions that we make are data driven, and so it's helpful now that we've finished this first quarter. Let's take a look and see where we are. These represent children. These represent our own students. And so when we see that things are not right, we want to say, what can we do differently? And so it's important that we look at these numbers now and take time to really reflect and see where we can grow from this and learn from this.
Now, what I'd like to tell our community, this isn't a Kershaw County issue. I'm on conference calls almost every day. This is a state issue. This is a countrywide issue. And the worst thing that we can do is be like an ostrich and put our head in the sand and not address, the elephant in the room. And so that's what this represents and some things that we're going to try to do. Similar at the middle school, we had 639 students receive 1,237 Fs. In this year, the first quarter, we had almost double that. 1,260 students received 4,260 60 plus Fs.
Right. So, Dr. Robbins, the concerning thing about these numbers are these are actually students. These are our children.
Right.
And so that's why we take this so seriously. We're not trying to be a negative Nelly or put a bend on it that's anything other than this is data, and we've come to the end of our first 9 weeks, and so we take a look at this. We want to make decisions based on data. What is it telling us? What is it saying to us? And as I look at headlines from around the state, other school districts are
Right,
doing the same
right.
thing. They're seeing the same thing with their students as well. But we owe it to our students to look and
Right.
see what this is telling us and maybe what changes we might need to make.
Right, absolutely. And then if you look at the third slide, not that the elementary schools are not incredibly important, the middle schools are incredibly important, but when you look at the number of Fs that our students are receiving at the high school, now we're creating at-risk factors. And when I say at-risk, potential dropouts, because every class they take in the high school is a class for credit that they need to graduate, and it puts them farther and farther behind. So if you look at this, again, we've nearly tripled the number of Fs our students are receiving. In the first two, the elementary and the middle school, I could attribute it to say, this is new for our virtual students, and so they may not quite be used to it. Unfortunately for the high school, we're the oldest one-to-one high school in the state of South Carolina. Our kids are very fluent. What it tells me is they're very disengaged right now.
Right, and that might be something that families are not as mindful of. They may think, well, my student's on the computer all the time.
Right.
I think he or she's doing the work, but this really says that, no, it's not as successful as we want it to be.
Right.
That there's some disconnect somewhere. And so now it's time. Let's have a conversation with families. Let's see what this means for you and your individual student.
Right. So again, this is really just kind of a summary that in 2019, based on the ADM we had last year in 2019, 13.5% of our students failed a course in the first 9 weeks. That's really pretty par, and something we want to see go down, but it's a typical year for us.
Right.
Now you flash forward to 2020.
Okay.
And we've had over 3,000 students, or nearly 30% of our students have failed a course based on this year's ADM. And so we have had some conversations with teachers. You've been in those conversations, obviously conversations with our principals, and we can come up with a couple of assumptions. And that is a majority, not all, but a majority of these failures are coming from our virtual students who are not completing work. They're not signing in, communicating with their teachers on a daily basis, and they're just disengaged.
Right. So much of learning that I've seen as a mom is that relationship that my children have had with their individual teachers, and they're not just teaching them the academics, they know about them, their lives, they're involved in it, and when you can have that face-to-face relationship, you can kind of gauge where a student needs some help or doesn't need help, even if the student doesn't express that. And I've seen that
Right.
across the board. I think that's where we kind of have lost sight
Right.
of this without being face-to-face.
Yeah, there's a Latin term in loco parente, which means in the place of the parents when the children in school, and that's the way we try to treat them, like they are our own children. And yeah, that's definitely lacking for our virtual students. So, I wanted to kind of wrap up, today's session with some final thoughts.
Okay.
And I have put together a letter that I believe you're going to send out to our families tonight. But I want our families to know we remain dedicated to provide families with a choice, between a virtual and face-to-face learning environment. However, if virtual students fail to complete the work, the district's then going to have to make some decisions on what we can best do to support your child. And that might mean that the option for learning virtually is eliminated and you have to come back to a face-to-face environment. We don't want to do that, but the farther and farther a child falls behind, the more we're failing. And our mission at KCSD is a real simple mission. And that's educating all students for success. And if we see the number of failures continue, then we're not meeting our mission.
Right, we can't ignore that. This is our responsibility. We are in the education business for
Right.
this community. And if we just kept on going and didn't pay any attention to what the data was saying, that wouldn't be the right thing to do. So I think this is a good conversation that we're continuing to have. We want families now to help join in this conversation. If you're hearing this and you've seen your child's report card and you're saying, I think maybe I do need to have the face-to-face option for my student, we're going to encourage you to do that. And that's the way we'd like it to happen, is let's have the conversation going on. But, if you get to a situation where your student's not doing well, we're going to need to say it's time
Right.
to come in back face to face.
We don't want this to be punitive. We definitely want it to be positive. We want to maintain choice. But at the end of the day, we have to ensure we're making progress with our students. And as I wrap this up, there's some people that I think really need to be acknowledged in this environment. I've already mentioned our school nurses. They're doing something not completely different, but different than what they usually do in a normal school year, managing isolation rooms and trying to prevent COVID-19 from entering our buildings. And so, kudos and my hat's off to that group. I really appreciate it. But if you could go into some of our classrooms and you can see how teachers have changed the manner in which they're delivering instruction, it's obviously we have no choice. We've got to figure out how to get, to our students, but they're doing it. And, we've given them suggestions and ideas, but they're coming up with their own ways and their own ideas. And so I'm begging parents to make sure you're supportive of your child's teacher. And if you have a virtual child, please make sure that they are engaging. Some of the strategies that we're going to utilize here in the future, the district, with some of our CARES Act money, is hiring retired teachers to help our teachers make phone calls home.
Right.
And some other things like that.
Kind of bridge the gap so that you can have a different perspective as a parent. You may hear from one of these retired teachers, so we wanted you to be aware of that. This is one tool that we're using.
Right.
The conversation with the family is so critical. So if you haven't had a good conversation, a good time to have a conversation with the child's teacher, let's do that. Let's get that arranged. Principals are there to help you too and have that ongoing conversation. We're looking at it as a total package, and we want to make sure every child is successful.
And then again, just ending and closing here, I'll say some of this may not look like it's the most positive information, but what I would tell you is I would stack what we're doing up against anybody in the state of South Carolina. I have constantly colleagues that are asking how we're able to do certain things, and it's only because we have your support. We will fail if we don't have your support, so we just urge you to stay connected and continue to support your child's teacher as we try to make a difference and progress through this pandemic. Thanks everybody, and have a nice and wonderful Thanksgiving.